where we are at now, we're not just working on Automobile 2.0, we are really revolutionizing the whole transportation system.
Today's guest is Dr. Sven Beiker.
This is how fleet operation works.
Founder of Silicon Valley Mobility, former BMW exec, Stanford lecturer, and trusted advisor to companies navigating the shift to electronic, autonomous, and connected vehicles.
There's quite something to be had for fleets with a breakthrough. An electric vehicle might seem as you pay more but get less. Now that is very different for fleets.
He's worked inside the boardrooms and engineering labs where the future of mobility is being built.
You can tell an expert technology works, but you cannot just change society or our collective understanding of the world as a human species. And the same for automated vehicles.
In this episode, we'll talk about where autonomy really stands today, what to know before electrifying your fleet, and why your people, not just your tech, will make or break a successful transition.
Because things change. So how willing are you to experiment?
Welcome to The Fleet. Welcome, Sven.
Hey, good morning, Chris. Thanks for having me.
I love this topic. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I have an EV and I love it. I'm always excited about where we are with autonomy and all of this. So this is going to be exciting. But before we dig into that, can we talk a little bit about your background? Like, how did you get to Silicon Valley Mobility? What was your journey to get you to where you are today?
Oh, wow. Well, how much time do we have? I mean, it actually does start at age 10 or something like this. And I will keep it brief. So at the age 10, it basically became clear to me I wanted to be an automotive engineer. Things just lined up the right way, and I ended up being an automotive engineer, started my career at BMW, the well-known passenger vehicle maker, at their global R&D center in Munich, Germany. Worked on vehicle and dynamics control systems, things like that. They got me to Silicon Valley, actually, about 22 years ago in the early 2000s. So BMW, like many other companies, not just automotive companies, like any kind of company, basically has like a Silicon Valley presence. And BMW had it already very early on in the early 2000s. I got transferred there to look at innovation, to integrate this into automobiles. And at that point, I think it started to grow in me, like, well, there's a traditional automotive, but also like the forefront, the next big thing, like, well, maybe disruption, even if that's a very overused term. And I got very interested in this dichotomy, if you will, like the two worlds that in the end hopefully will drive things forward. From BMW, then I got transferred. Well, not got transferred. I transferred myself, actually. I left BMW and moved to Stanford University. This was around 2008, something like that, when we launched at Stanford University the Center for Automotive Research at Stanford, which is a nice acronym, CARS, Center for Automotive Research at Stanford.
I like that.
And there we got, it was at the beginning mostly about automation or autonomous driving, but also it was very important to me to take a more holistic perspective, not just automation, but also electrification, new mobility concepts, sharing, connectivity. And did that at the intersection of academia and the corporate world for quite some time. And then I got into consulting, first at McKinsey, very well-known, large consulting firm. And from there, now about 8 years ago, I launched my own independent consulting practice, which is Silicon Valley Mobility. I still pursue largely these topics, autonomy, electrification, and so on. And really at the nexus of technology and business. So I still lecture at the Stanford Business School, strategy making for the evolving automotive industry. And I really want to bring these disciplines together because I always like to point out when we are done developing a great technology, that doesn't mean that people will buy it, doesn't mean that we have a great product on the market. And therefore, I'd like to combine those, obviously, with environmental perspectives, policy, and such as well. But really, when I was 10, like some 20 years ago or something like that, I had this desire, automobiles, that's really what fascinates me. And still doing it, not tired of it.
Well, it's great that you can live your 10-year-old dream in the automotive industry. I mean,
Exactly.
that's how many people get to do that, right?
See, I don't know. I mean, I see, I know I follow quite a few people, and I will say with all my friends, colleagues, and so on in the industry, I'm at the place where I want to be.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it. That's definitely the
Works
best
for
way to
me.
do it. It seems like that, considering what you like to do and what you are doing, this is kind of like the golden era for that in a way. I mean, it's like we've had so many advancements and, electrification has come on so strong and autonomy has been just, a constant point of discussion. Like, where are we right now with all of that?
Well, let's see, Chris. I mean, to stick to your analogy or the term that you used, golden era, I would actually want to rephrase that a little bit. So
Okay.
I want to say we are a little bit past the gold rush. So the first gold was discovered by some early pioneers and they went crazy with it. And now we're almost in an era. Now what is there enough gold and what are we actually going to do with it? So now we're in this phase of figuring it out where you need consultants obviously to do it. Someone with an independent perspective. So the gold rush, I would say, especially in terms of autonomy, that was, let's say, 2016, give or take. And not 2015, actually 2016, there was much more hype and so on than there was in 2015. And since then it has tapered off a little bit. So where we are at now, so we can say from many examples, technology works, and that is technology for self-driving cars, robo-taxis, trucks, what have you, and also for electrification. So obviously we have electric vehicles on the market. The only missing piece is they need to be bought at the quantities forecasted. And to put both into perspective, and therefore let's stick for a moment with electrification and get back to automation.
Sure.
For electrification, I mean, electric vehicles work. Probably everybody at least knows that that works, but infrastructure there still has challenges like charging infrastructure. Is there enough? Is it reliable enough? Is it easy to use? What I always like to say, we are not just working on automobile, and an automobile can be passenger car or commercial vehicle, heavy duty truck or what have you. We're not just working on automobile 2.0. We are really revolutionizing the whole transportation system. And that is a larger perspective and does require this infrastructure, in this case, the charging infrastructure as well. And this is not quite where we are, where we would need to be. Somewhat similar actually with automation as well. So if I say the technology works, I'm sure some people will type into the comments, how dare he saying that it doesn't really work, look at this and that, la la la, whatever. I will say the robo-taxis that I've tried, and I really want to call out Waymo, the subsidiary of Alphabet Google.
Managing a fleet can feel overwhelming, but not when you have Element Fleet Management on your side. From maintenance and fuel to data analytics and electric vehicle transitions, Element helps businesses keep their fleets efficient, cost-effective, and ready for anything. With decades of industry expertise and cutting-edge technology, they simplify the complex so you can focus on what you do best, running your business. Ready to take your fleet to the next level? Visit elementfleet.com today.
Getting into their robo-taxis here in San Francisco, right outside my house, basically, it's now in Palo Alto. It works shockingly well. And this is what I say as the little Sven who always wanted to be an automotive engineer and who thinks that he grasps the opportunities and challenges of engineering in the space. It seems to work. Not everywhere, not under any conditions, but it works. And this is where also some infrastructure questions come in again. So these vehicles work in well-defined areas that some might say are too limited. For instance, you can get a ride in San Francisco, but not to the airport.
Right.
And these are infrastructure questions. It's somewhat similar to electrification. That means it might require some communication infrastructure or what I'd like to call machine-readable roads. So road signs and road markings and what is it actually that's on the road that this is all machine-readable. but also a policy framework. And this is where, again, not just Automobile 2.0, really a new transportation paradigm. And this is where still some work needs to be done.
Let's talk about that infrastructure just a little bit. I got to imagine when internal combustion vehicles hit the market at the beginning, it took you probably couldn't drive coast to coast.
Would have been quite an adventure. I mean, theoretically, yes. But yeah.
Yeah, you probably had to bring a lot of gasoline along with you. But but it doesn't seem like we have to do that level of effort. But like what kind of effort do you think we need to put into this? What's holding that back? You keep hearing about like charging stations are going to be, rolling out all over, and then I just never see more charging stations. So what's holding it all back?
On the electrification side, I think to a large extent, it's the investment.
And is that something that a government's going to have to do, or is that something you think individuals can achieve?
Probably it takes both, and then we end up with a public-private partnership, and that not always makes it easier. But I was going to say for the investment, we end up with a typical chicken-egg problem, which means, well, if there are not enough vehicles, why would you build charging stations? And if there are not enough charging stations, why would anyone buy an electric vehicle? So it's this classical problem. Sure, if you somehow magically were able to convert all gas stations into charging stations, or at least the worth or the investment that ever went into charging station, you can convert that into electrification, then that's a no-brainer, then it probably would work. We are not necessarily in an era in, let's say, at least in the Western world, where huge infrastructure projects are straightforward to implement. And they also then get political, and what is the challenge there? And otherwise, I would say for electrification, it would work. There are debates going on. Do we have enough electricity? And it seems to be, in general, there is enough electricity. You just need to ask at what time. So meaning when everybody comes home after work in the evening on a hot day, cranks up the AC and wants to prepare a meal and whatever, there's a lot of internet work that actually does require on a global scale a lot of energy today as well, all the AI stuff. If all this happens at the same time, then it might be a problem. But if you charge your vehicle at 2 a.m., then that's typically not a problem. You can then ask, is it the right kind of energy? Is it clean energy or not so clean energy? All these questions can be asked, but in theory, it should work. But the question always is, how do we get from the theory to practice? And this is where investments are necessary. And this is where government incentives certainly help, because you brought up, and I think it's very correct to make the connection or comparison to combustion engine powered vehicles. I mean, to run a gasoline powered vehicle is relatively cheap, relatively easy, and you don't really experience a range problem. So in a way, an electric vehicle could, I'm not saying it should, but it could be seen as something you pay more and get less. And that means someone needs to step in and tip the balance a little bit. And that are government incentive programs that are not obviously very popular at the moment with the administration that we have. So funding might run out for this. So there's that. And on the automation side, to just maybe compare and contrast that a little bit, it is also about investment. So let's say if you were to say we need to repaint all the road markings so that they're really clearly visible for self-driving vehicles. If we really want to maybe upgrade all the street or road signs, like stop sign, speed limit and everything. Some of them are sprayed over where we as humans can guess probably that this is 30 and not 80 miles per hour because we are in a residential zone. For an automated vehicle, it's not so straightforward. That is an investment program as well. But what is important for the infrastructure for automated vehicles, there's also standardization is very important. So the communication standard that one sort of vehicle fleet or manufacturer has, does that work for another manufacturer as well? For electrification, we are past this standardization problem where we had in the beginning different charging standards, for instance. And that is no longer the case. So that got all standardized, also by a client of mine, if I may say so. SAE International really is there at the forefront and brings industry together. And for the charging standard, also like the pioneers in the field, let's say Tesla with the more established automotive OEMs. So we have a lot of standardization for electrification, but we need standardization for automation or autonomous driving as well.
When you say that, and you think about all that, there's a lot of things that probably need to be standardized. I mean, like you're talking about communication systems with the infrastructure so that autonomy can understand what a sign looks like and things like that. I mean, that even developing those standards, I have to imagine is a pretty large task. But I would imagine also, one of the nice things about internal combustion engines is we have auto parts stores all over the country with auto parts, readily available. And, so I would imagine even standardization at that level to some extent too needs to happen. What kinds of things are sort of the big challenges for that standardization effort?
The industry has this love-hate relationship with standards. So
yeah,
they hate it if it's not their standard. They love it if it is their standard. So in a way, I mean, standards should make cooperation, partnerships, and business in the industry easier because you adhere to a standard, and that means you get economies of scale, and therefore things do get easier. I mean, obviously, not everybody can have their standard because then it's not a standard anymore. So in the end, it obviously requires to bring these players together and work commonly towards a shared goal and shared specifications that are then laid out in a standard. And that obviously takes time. And it's not just a technical discussion. It is a strategic discussion, to almost like a coaching mediation kind of discussion.
Sounds like a great place for a consultant to jump in,
now
right?
that you say
I wonder where you find one of those.
So this is not where I wanted to go. I really wanted to show why it is dicey and challenging, and it just takes time.
It's interesting. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is that a lot of the challenges are kind of solved. I mean, I guess there's that quote about technology. It's like the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it seems like that's a little bit of what's going on here, because I mean, especially in like the United States, we've got giant swaths of rural area where the economics of infrastructure are always challenging. And then we've got big cities where some cities have old and, crumbling infrastructure, and some cities like, San Francisco, for example, have more modern and advanced infrastructure. So those seem like really big hurdles to try to overcome.
Absolutely. And maybe to throw in one example into what you just said. I mean, it's rural areas and the metro areas for sure, but then just think that every metro area more or less has a different standard for the traffic lights. Let's say Los Angeles and San Diego. I'm not sure if they are completely different standards. It's not that really each individual has a different standard. It's not like this, but just think there's so many different ways how traffic lights are being operated. And it's basically something that has grown historically. And now if you want something that a self-driving car wants to talk to the traffic light, which obviously would make it so much easier and safer to operate these vehicles. If a traffic light could send a signal, I'm red, or even better, I'm turning red in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 seconds. That would obviously help greatly, because then an automated vehicle doesn't need to guess, what I'm looking at there, is it a red traffic light or are the Christmas lights already out early this year? And that would obviously help greatly. But if this is not standardized, and therefore also if it's not standardized, then it's more costly, obviously, to implement a new communication system that can handle all of that. So that is just that we are dealing here with a giant system that is historically grown and now needs to be standardized, harmonized, so that robots can interact with it. And we see that humans, there's something to it, that we are flexible and have intuition, and we make it work. robots operate more by the book.
I remember seeing somebody talking about elevators in the past. And originally elevators were manually operated by an individual sat in the elevator all day. And then they got this, push button system, and they still had to have the guy sitting in the elevator to push the button. And then at some point, the big thing was the big red stop button that I guess kind of got people over a lot of their fears of being in an elevator. I think there's a lot of concerns people have over autonomous vehicles. And do you think that's well-placed, misplaced? I mean, it seems like you're saying that like a lot of this tech is working. Where do you think we are there, and how safe is it?
So your comparison to the elevator is a great one. And relatively early on, we called in the work that was still at Stanford that we were doing together with many industry partners. We called a self-driving car a horizontal elevator. So we'll not go up and down, but horizontal, because it basically automates your ride. And we were discussing quite a bit, actually, this operator in an elevator, and that person was still around even when technically not required anymore. And it was exactly for those reasons, what you say, for the user's trust or user's comfort, especially if you introduce a new system and innovation. Let's call it an elevator. And in the very early days, you need to have a specialist to operate these things. And then all of a sudden, that person is not required anymore. You cannot just take that person out, because then the first people who are going to use this, like, what do you mean there's nobody? I'm by myself now in this beast, and I might be trapped in it. So what can I do? So this is again where you could reprogram a robot and tell it it's totally fine if there's nobody in there. You can just use it. You can reprogram a robot. You can also tell an expert or individuals, you know what, this elevator is totally fine. But you cannot just change society or our collective understanding of the world as a human species. You cannot just take a magic wand and say, whoop, no operator required anymore, everything's fine. So therefore, I don't know what the transition was, over which time actually the elevator operator was not required anymore, but still in, and when the last operator was taken out. But I would guess it might have been a 20-year time frame.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was in the last 5 years, the last elevator operator.
And when I just said it, I thought there are probably still elevators with someone in there for romantic reasons or something.
Yeah.
And the same for automated vehicles. I mean, in a way, it's a good thing that people are concerned because, well, remember, traffic is a dangerous undertaking. Driving an automobile should not be taken lightly. Things can happen. And this is what people obviously have in their mind. And now I should entrust myself to this thing that I have no idea how it works. So that's good that people are suspicious. But I will say, everybody with whom I've taken a ride in the robo-taxi that I mentioned earlier walked away from it like, wow, that works so well. Basically, they get in this car in the beginning, they might be a little bit nervous, or they might say, I will never like this, I will never use this. And I tell them, well, just give it a try, because I also want to study you, how you feel in it, because I know you are very critical. And after max 5 minutes, they basically say that it seems to work. But we should also not forget, and that is different from an elevator. It's not just about the people within this contraption. It's also the people outside.
Right.
And even more so, they are not giving consent to this machine. Whereas in an elevator, you can even say, by pushing this button, you consent to whatever.
Yeah.
And that is, again, something where it's not about just the next generation of automobile. It's this whole traffic system. And other road users, especially vulnerable road users, play a very important role. If you cannot hear or see that well, and then there are vehicles that you might not hear, which is what we see already with electric vehicles, but also where you cannot have eye contact or so, or if you just know there are driverless vehicles in my neighborhood, then some people might get afraid to get on the road. So we need to take this seriously.
On that, I mean, like, clearly people are the challenge in all of this. to some extent. When we look at the EVs, you've got people fighting back against chargers, and you've got, people don't like change. But when you look at autonomy, for example, and people are like, well, I'm not sure if this is safe. How would you evaluate the safety of these things? I mean, because people make a lot of mistakes, right?
Well, let's see. I don't want to put all of it on the people, as you said. And then,
okay, fair enough.
By the way, I'm always saying that the people, that's us as well. That's also Chris Brandt
we are
and
the people
Sven
too.
Beiker. So we should be included. So we are part of the problem, Chris.
Yes.
And in a way, then you can say, yes, it is people, because at least for now, people are still creating technology and are creating innovation. And I do see quite a bit that much of this, what we now see in these self-driving automobiles, comes out of the computer science field. And there, I will say, sometimes I see a bit less of an understanding for these soft facts and human aspects. And so I'm missing this sometimes, that I think we should be more more active, or more cognizant, I should say. What I mentioned in the very beginning, to bring these different disciplines together. It's not just about creating the best software for an automobile. It is really, how do humans interact with it? How do we make sure that we make things better overall? Now, also what we said at the beginning, this technology seems to largely work, but we need to figure out what does it actually mean now for our transportation systems overall, for our cities, for our society. And this is where there are a lot of studies happening. I'm also part of a lesson learned study that we are conducting at the moment. So what can we learn from these early deployments to make subsequent deployments, especially in other areas? This is for Europe, for instance. How can we make sure that they learn from it? And this is where we need to have a lot of exchange. But I think we're on a good path.
Well, I just want to shift gears here a little bit. And in the sense of the biggest area for improvement and to realize the value of all this technology seems to be around sort of the larger fleets. I mean, you've got so many fleet vehicles on the road. What are the challenges there? Because obviously, if you can get some deep adoption there, that's going to change the landscape dramatically, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, that's a very important point. And I would say for both.
Managing a fleet of vehicles isn't just about keeping the wheels turning. It's about data, driver safety, cost efficiency, and most importantly, getting the job done without a hitch. That's where Element Fleet Management comes in. They help businesses from small teams to Fortune 500 companies make smarter decisions about their vehicles. Whether it's electrifying your fleet, cutting maintenance costs, or using advanced analytics to get ahead of issues, Element has the tools and people to make it happen. For more information, visit elementfleet.com today.
Electric and autonomous. There's quite something to be had for fleets, where I say, like, a professional operation of these vehicles might be quite helpful in helping with a breakthrough. What I mean by that is somewhat related to what I said earlier. An electric vehicle might seem as you pay more but get less. And that's basically, in the sense, how we've come to appreciate our automobiles or our automobility. We can just get into it and drive wherever, whenever, and whatever the weather might be like. So we just get in and go. And I might be here in Palo Alto. I want to drive to San Francisco. And on the way, I decide, you know what, it is actually a pretty nice day. And I drive down to Santa Cruz and sit on the beach instead. That requires a certain level of now real autonomy, like independence of any kind of infrastructure and so on. And if my gas tank is low, I just put in some gasoline. If the battery is low, I might need to search for charging a little bit more. It might take longer. If it was going to be a self-driving car that I can use maybe here between Palo Alto and San Francisco, but I might not run down to Santa Cruz, doesn't work. Now, that is very different for fleets, because if you implement, maintain, operate, whatever, a fleet, you would typically think about what for and where for. So that you say, well, to stick with this example, this is a passenger transportation service in between Palo Alto and San Francisco, and it will never go to Santa Cruz. Fine. So then I can actually implement the necessary infrastructure or check out the infrastructure that's already there and say, this works. And then I can make the business case. Okay, I purchased, pick any number, 100 vehicles, and I basically want to amortize them over the next 5 years and then basically depreciate them over the next 10 years, and that is a good business case. But an individual owner like Chris or Sven, we don't think like this, because we think like, you know what, Thanksgiving, we might want to go to the Sierras. Oh, no, wait a minute. And Eugene actually has her 80th birthday coming up. We have to go there. Okay, we need to do like a whole road trip. So fleet operations, there's that with the business case and the operations. And also a professional operator, you can have a much better, or you should have a much better understanding how to operate a certain technology or not, which means don't do too much fast charging because it depreciates your battery faster. Don't charge it at 6 p.m., but in the middle of the night. Don't operate this self-driving technology under certain conditions, only this and that. So this is where this would help a lot. And also the fleet operations helps the creators of this technology, so that they say, okay, if we create this technology, we know at least this amount of vehicles is going to be purchased. So let's pick an example, and I don't have any stake in it. I'm not selling these things, but Rivian and their electric vans for Amazon. I would guess that was quite an important thing in Rivian's journey, the electric vehicle maker, that they had to deal with Amazon and their investment. So this is where fleets, not just the huge ones, also the smaller ones, because if you have like a fleet of 5 or 10 vehicles, and you can share the data with the maybe startup that built those vehicles, and the startup is really interested in how does it work in the field. So that's obviously much easier than if you want to get all the data from private individuals. So, hey, fleet managers, come and be innovative together.
Well, and I think I kind of look at it like it's a little, when you're talking about it, it's kind of a little bit like an airport. Like planes can't just land anywhere.
Yeah.
They have all the infrastructure and the telemetry for landing at that airport, right? I mean, so from an autonomy perspective, highways are a relatively easy autonomy kind of piece of the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's not as much complexity there. And you get into, a hub area or something like that, and you put all the more fine controlled telemetry there. It seems like it's, just a real win-win kind of
Absolutely.
opportunity.
Yeah. So with fleets, it's just a much more organized setting of the transportation field.
More predictable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's a lot of different types of vehicles. We've talked a lot about electrification, but there's other technologies out there too, right? I mean, there's like hydrogen infrastructure. I mean, do you see that as like the two efforts that are competing against each other and sort of wasting resources? Or do you say, no, these are different use cases entirely, and this is appropriate for this and this is appropriate for that?
Yeah,
kind of thing?
Good point. Generally speaking, hydrogen would be considered part of electrification.
Okay.
At least as long as we are talking about a hydrogen fuel cell. The fuel cell that basically converts hydrogen and oxygen from the air into electricity. And then it's an electric motor, therefore it's part of electrification. There's also this other field where you fill hydrogen into an internal combustion engine, then it would not be considered electrification. It would basically be an extension of the internal combustion engine, obviously. But no matter how you use hydrogen, whether that's with a fuel cell and electric motor or with a tank and a combustion engine, it's exactly as you say, Chris. It depends on the use case. And I do not expect that we will see hydrogen-powered vehicles for urban transportation, urban personal transportation, I should say, or commuter vehicles. So the vehicles that you and I might drive to and from work. Yeah, there might be exceptions, and they are already on the market. So you get some passenger vehicles with fuel cell. In my view, those are more fantastic demonstrator vehicles as opposed to the beginning of what it might be in the end. So for general passenger vehicles, I think battery technology is far enough advanced now that we can say this is going to be it. And charging is getting faster, more reliable, more broadly available, that we can probably say for the passenger vehicles that we will purchase, that's going to be battery electric. Now, the more you haul, the heavier the vehicle and its load actually, and the longer the distance, the better the case actually for hydrogen. Because still battery, the range, if you want to get beyond 300 miles, something becomes a pretty heavy battery, which then brings up sustainability questions, but certainly also cost. And especially then on a truck, which obviously needs a larger battery than a passenger car, the battery starts to eat up a lot of your payload. And therefore, why would you do it? Whereas hydrogen, by comparison, is relatively light. Not just that hydrogen is the lightest element that we have on Earth, it's also the storage system, meaning the tank and the fuel cell doesn't weigh much. And the electric motor is always lighter than a combustion engine. So the weight factor is much better for hydrogen technology. And also the refueling is basically as fast as gasoline or diesel. So that works out quite well. It just becomes something, again, the infrastructure. But there it is something where you can say, well, if I operate a fleet of trucks and I know they're going to run from Sacramento to Denver for whatever reason, and I just make sure that along the route there are like 2 stations where there's hydrogen, this can work very well. Technology, I would say, is mostly proven. And again, doesn't matter then whether that's a fuel cell or combustion engine. But it's, again, about the infrastructure investment. I know that it was still under Governor Schwarzenegger. He was quite a proponent of hydrogen technology. Under Schwarzenegger, there was here in the West the idea for a hydrogen corridor along Interstate 5. So basically from Seattle or Vancouver all the way down to San Diego. I'm not sure if that ever happened. It's, again, the infrastructure investment. Are there enough trucks actually then using it? But again, the higher the payload, the longer the distance, hydrogen has something to it. And so there we'll see. Also, just one more thing to say. I said urban transportation with buses, it might be different. We see more and more electric buses, and I think there's something about it. It does become a bit of a problem if you want to have all city buses being charged overnight. Do you get actually there enough electricity? It might be a bit of a challenge. So therefore, hydrogen, hey, if you have at the bus depot a hydrogen station, that could work very well.
Well, and it also seems like there's a intermodal kind of opportunity there as well, right? I mean, it's, there's a lot of other vehicles that use a lot of diesel, for example, the train rail infrastructure, the shipping infrastructure, all that as well, too.
Absolutely. So, I mean, for instance, my hometown in northern Germany, they have this hydrogen powered train that goes in between Hamburg and Bremerhaven, whoever wants to look this up. So that's a hydrogen-powered train. Then that works. I'm not sure how happy they are with it. I don't see this growing much. Then quite often the funding, maybe in this case from the European Union, runs out and they need to get new trains, and they figure that the actually electric from the electric wire, the trains are cheaper, sometimes even diesel, believe it or not.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, in some ways, diesel trains are electric as well, right? I mean,
true, they're diesel electric, yeah. And also, right, to your point, Chris, there's intermodal and intermediaries. It's not that diesel, for instance, is automatically bad. There might be applications where, especially if you run them at a very efficient operating point, if you have like the soot filter and after treatment and all of this, it can be a relatively clean technology. I'm not sure how much time we have, but if we had more time, we could even go into electric fuels, something that I was in the beginning very suspicious of when we say we use electricity to create fossil fuels. They're not fossil anymore, but they are carbon based. So you could go into all of those again. So it used to be an automobile is an automobile or a train is a train. But now there's much more shall we say, vanilla in that.
Yeah. Well, and I've noticed, I mean, you talk about, the hydrogen train in Germany and that. I mean, it seems like so many different countries are at different places. Because, for example, on the electric car front, when you look at what's going on in China, they have, 1,000-kilometer batteries that they're offering on some of the vehicles, right? I mean, that's what, like 620 miles or something like that on a battery. I mean, that's double what we're seeing here in the U.S. Why?
Yeah. Well, let's see, Chris. I did read the headlines on those as well, and
Okay.
I will need to double check if that's factually true, because in the end, everybody operates in the same regime of physics. That doesn't mean that everybody is equally smart deploying technology or figuring things out. But I would not expect at this point that there's a factor of 2 or something like this in what they put on the vehicle.
Seems a lot.
It might be a much larger battery than, or a technology that doesn't last as long. So on the battery front, I know it is relatively close to alchemy. It's really finding the holy grail in that technology, and you have to optimize many things. There's weight and cost, and how many charge cycles can it use, and what content of ethically fair source materials, and all of this, and that's all very
and
important.
How does that work at scale, right? I mean, that's another big piece.
Yeah, and then I also read these things that they can be charged like within 5 minutes from 0 to 80% over.
That seems a little scary to me with that much electricity in that short of time.
And look, I mean, it might be similar to these great demonstrator projects that I said earlier about hydrogen. That there's maybe something on the battery front as well. Even if it's, let's say, a technology / innovation stunt that we might see there. These are important because they're pushing the envelope. And I'm really glad that you brought up China, because in the Western world, we should acknowledge that they've been followers and copiers for the longest time. But I think, and this is what I say as a German automotive engineer, it's time to also learn from what's happening in China.
Well, it's not just China, right? I mean, the bulk of the battery technology industry is really in Asia at large, right?
In South Korea, there's a lot.
And the nice thing is, at least you don't have all the shipping and logistics, to get your batteries, which actually has to probably make them cheaper as well, I would imagine.
Yeah. So that does become a big thing as well. I mean, we could talk about tariffs and trades as well, but even the pure logistics, if you need to ship a battery like literally half around the globe, that certainly has an impact on not just the cost, but also the sustainability of the overall system, which shows us, again, at scale, things might look very, very different.
Very different.
What they might be in the lab.
Yeah. Well, so let's get back to sort of that big bang impact with the fleet side of things. Like, are you seeing companies adopting these technologies for their fleet? If so, what is sort of that turning point that gets them over the line?
Well, no, I mean, there are definitely examples. I mean, I mentioned Amazon and Rivian earlier. We do see in trucking that I will need to think now what are the best examples. So therefore, I'm not going to give names because don't want to pick out any particular one. There are certainly others. But there are a lot of logistics companies that are getting involved with autonomous technology companies. One that I would definitely recommend looking at is Aurora or Kodiak or such. So these are companies here in Silicon Valley, actually, that are working with logistics companies and are deploying those self-driving trucks for now, mostly in Texas for a number of reasons. So Houston to Dallas is a key route where these vehicles are operating. Why are they doing it? So it is something for one that these logistics companies and therefore also fleet operators are interested in a business case. There's a driver shortage.
Right.
I understand there are not enough truck drivers. So that these logistics companies are willing to do some upfront investment and support these technology companies to move innovation forward, to hopefully be very early on the receiving end, that they can deploy this technology. Meaning work together with a startup, and these are very established startups now. They've been around for 10, 12, 15 years. But to really help them also understand what I said earlier, not just that it's the greatest computer science solution, but also actually practical. Look, this is how fleet operation works. If you have an 18-wheeler on the highway and it doesn't work because there's a software glitch, and you have like $200,000 of fried chicken in your truck, then that is not a software problem. That's actually a pretty business problem. And so therefore they like to work together to share this experience, to move things forward together. And also, I will say, I think some of the communication, some of the corporate storytelling is also important, that you see, oh, logistics company so-and-so deploys the first driverless vehicle. I would say it's both, like really being at the forefront and early receiving end of this technology. And then also it's to show innovation.
And I could imagine there could be the potential for some significant financial benefits as well, right? Because I mean, if you have a vehicle, when it's sitting idle, you're not getting value out of it, right?
Yeah.
And people have physical limitations for driving.
Yeah.
I mean, they can only drive
Yeah.
so far.
Yeah.
So, you add autonomy in, you can probably keep vehicles moving 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, right?
So that's what I said then earlier. Maybe it wasn't clear enough. So when they want to be at the early receiving end, that means to improve the business equation, because there's a driver shortage. And you can even say, it's not my perspective, but some say, even if there's a driver, if we don't need to pay a driver, that might be better for some fleets. Not my view of the world, but that's definitely what I hear, to make it just cheaper compared to a drivered vehicle. So not just to fill in for the not existing driver, but also to make it cheaper compared to the existing driver. So that is definitely being discussed.
I would imagine too, with a driver being on the road for an extended period of time, there's a safety issue as well. I mean, you talk about the relative safety
absolutely.
of autonomous, and like not having to repair your vehicle and not having to deal with accidents, things like that. That's got to be nice.
And
too.
Look, you have these limitations. I think you can only drive a maximum of 11 hours within 24 hours or something like this, for all the right reasons. And even if there's 11 hours, I mean, a lot can happen in those 11 hours, and a lot does happen. So it has the potential to make things safer. There are these numbers to what extent accidents can be attributed to human error, and human error can be split up into like risky driving, but also like impaired driving or fatigue or something like that. I mean, driving is a hard job. It is a hard job.
For sure.
Absolutely. And if there can be help, something that we have not talked about is driver assistance, which is, if you will, the earlier stages of self-driving technology. So there's already a lot in this. But I want to get to one of your points, Chris, when you said 24/7 and 365 days a year. That we should not assume. At least we should not put it on our pitch deck for these technologies or ventures. Because and this is where it's really important to bring in the expertise from fleet operators. So even if there are theoretically no limitations to the driving of the vehicle, it does need downtime, and you need to maintenance a vehicle. You need to refuel it, whether that's diesel or electric or hydrogen. You need to have a buffer in between jobs and all of this, which, as much as I understand from car sharing operations, for instance, I understand that 30% utilization is some sort of the sweet spot, which I find mind blowing. I mean, for car sharing, it's not trucking, it's not robo-taxi, it's car sharing. But 30%, people are telling me. And they say, yeah, because beyond this, it does get a problem. Then someone is waiting for the vehicle, but someone else is late. And if you have 30%, then during peak hours, there might be more, but you need to manage basically the system, somewhat peak hours in mind, but not to over engineer the system. So 100% utilization is not achievable. I think right now what we have in trucking, for instance, is that about 50% of the capacity, I think, is only used. And that's because of empty routes after a job, like back to the next one. And also not every truck is operating at full capacity. So we have 50%. And the understanding is that self-driving technology can probably get it up.
What would the like the three top things if you're somebody managing a fleet of vehicles and you wanted to get started? What are like the top three things you should do?
Well, I mean, first of all, be clear about your problems. So what problem are you trying to solve? And that is what we said just a minute ago about autonomy. Is it that you want to solve a driver shortage problem? Is it that you want to show some innovation? And on the driver shortage problem, what we've not discussed yet, there doesn't really seem to be a situation yet where you have fewer humans involved in these self-driving vehicles, because there's typically still someone remote watching it. And that for all the right reasons and for the time being. So define your problems. What are you trying to solve? And then actually, what are your expectations? Is it like, I really want to improve my bottom line, or is it something else? So really weigh your problems versus the expectations. So what is the perfect state you want to go towards? And then think about how willing are you to experiment? So if you buy, let's stick with trucking. If you buy a new truck for, I don't know, $250,000 or something like that, you basically know what you get. But if you get engaged with whether it's a Silicon Valley startup or a large tech firm, and they say, well, we can do this thing, you actually don't really know what it's going to look like in a year from now, because things change. So how willing are you to experiment? It is also partner in the industry and think about where is regulatory change necessary. So lobbying does become important. Quite often, for instance, in electrification, what we see that the business case might look pretty good upfront because you get incentives, because maybe you get tax deductions. You obviously don't need to pay fuel tax, but that might change over time. So also keep that in mind. So what it is today is not necessarily what it will be tomorrow.
Awesome advice. And I love this topic. I could probably spend another few hours talking about this, and maybe, because we touched on a lot of things there. Maybe we should have you back at some point and finish up some of these conversations. But thanks so much for being on, Sven. Really, really awesome stuff. And it's a really exciting area. Thanks so much.
You're very much welcome. Good discussion, Chris. Thank you.